All right. It gives me great pleasure to welcome to the stage a great friend of mine and Catherine's, and certainly all of us in the industry. I've known Jonathan Isaacson for certainly well over a decade. He is, without a doubt, probably one of the industry's biggest picture thinkers. Getting into a conversation with Jonathan when he calls you, you've got to book off at least 60 to 90 minutes because he is just so fascinating. And you get into a range of discussions, and just to get inside his mind is an absolute privilege. And all of us are going to get inside his mind right now for the next 25 minutes as Jonathan talks about COVID and talks about how it has fundamentally changed and accelerated so many different things that we know in our industry. And without further ado, I'd like to welcome Jonathan Isaacson to the stage, who is going to blow us away with some of his insights. Thank you so much, Jonathan, for being on the stage. I'm not sure. Oh, here he is.
There I am.
Mr.
You can hear me.
I can certainly hear you. You sound great. You look great. Certainly younger,
Well,
like you could have been on this panel.
The age range keeps going up, which is not exciting for me. Speaking about time, I don't know if you remember the first SKUCon conference that I presented at, and I probably shouldn't tell this story. But good advice before a presentation is to use in my case, the men's room. And I think you must have fiddled with the soap dispenser because I hit the soap dispenser and it shot not into my hands, but onto my pants and not my pant leg. And if you add water, when you try to clean it up, it just foams. And there was no hand dryer in there to do the yoga position and get it off. And if you use paper towels, it spreads. So if you had not gone over by a few minutes, I would have been sort of saddling onto the stage looking kind of funny.
There you go. Well, we'll see if we can get some pictures. But anyways, I will bid you adieu. I can't wait to hear your presentation. And thank you so much for being with us. It's wonderful to have a full circle experience, given that you spoke to our first QCon.
Well, thank you for inviting me. It's exciting to be here. And it was about a year ago that I was on a SKUcast with David Nicholson. We were looking back over 10 years and looking forward a year to try to predict what was going to happen. And we should have, but we did not predict the pandemic. The virus was already spreading at that time. We didn't think about it. We didn't know about it. Today, I'm going to try to look forward again. This presentation is about perspective. I promise not to talk about pandemics for too long. There is a slide. I'm going to go way back to go forward. And when I say way back, I am going to go way back. And we're going to talk a little bit starting with dinosaurs, actually before the dinosaurs. And we know that there's always been change. It's a little bit trite at this point in time. For those of you who don't like thinking about or looking at geologic time, the Paleozoic era, which is before 250 million years ago, was the time of the Cambrian Explosion, and this will all be relevant later on, I promise. And that's where there was this explosion of life on the planet. And this ended at the Permian extinction 250 million years ago, where you got climate change from volcanoes and a bunch of life got wiped out. You get the dinosaurs, they last for about 200 million years. An asteroid hits the planet, that's the end of most of them. But good for us because you get the rise of the mammals, and voila, here we are a number of years later on Hopin doing this presentation. And today, if we think about it, in some ways, technology is our volcano and our asteroid, our great driver of change. And a number of you have seen this slide in the past in different forms of move the boxes around, but technology is accelerating at an exponential rate. It's changing markets, it's driving globalization, demographics, environmental change, which we talked about earlier today. And it's clearly having an impact on our politics, which we saw a little bit yesterday. And so technology has been one of the most significant drivers of changes over the last 150 years. But pandemics over history, and this will be no different, have also been accelerants of change if you go back in time. And I went back in time to try to figure out how long there have been plagues, and the one that was the furthest back that I could find was the plague of Justinian in 540 AD, which took out about 25% of the population. Of course, the big one was the bubonic plague around 1350, which killed half of Europe, 200 million people. And you didn't really have to worry about ICUs becoming overcrowded or the hospitals becoming full because there was really no medical care, no ICUs. Nobody really understood what was going on, although they did understand that people somehow carried this, in fact, because in a place that later became Italy, in a port, they used to make the sailors wait before they came ashore. First, it was 30 days. It was a law called Trentino. And later, they increased it as they became more concerned to 40 days or quarantino, which is actually where we get the word quarantine. But clearly, pandemics have been around for a while, change has been around for a while, and exponential technological change has been around for a while. But we are now going through a great acceleration. And the rate of change of technology has not changed, but what has changed, what has accelerated, is really the adoption of this technology. And because of that, and hopefully there won't be a great extinction, although there will be a fair extinction of business, unfortunately, but markets and business will reorient. There'll be new businesses that arise from this. And at the end of the day, we're going to emerge into a different landscape. And that landscape is going to be full of people who are the most adaptable to change. So I want to start sort of going into a little bit more of this with a short video. It is very difficult to hear. It's a crappy video. So if you have trouble hearing it, I'm sorry. We'll see. I'll explain what he says. It's only 18 seconds. So this is a guy at the zoo, and if you didn't catch it because it's kind of soft, this guy who's one of the co-founders of YouTube, who made the first YouTube video, said that there are elephants at the zoo and they have these very long, I forgot what he called them, noses, whatever it is. And it's titled Me at the Zoo, and it's been seen over 130 million years. And this was only 15 years ago that this first YouTube video was made. And clearly YouTube has become very important over this period of time. And we have gone through, over the last 150 or 60 years, this Cambrian explosion of technology. And I have talked about this in the past with this book by Robert Gordon, who's an economist at Northwestern. And he dated this at 1870, and we could argue whether it's then or whether it's earlier with railroads or whatever. I mark 1860 because of oil. You get oil, you get a new energy source, and then you get this absolute explosion of technology. And you get the internal combustion engine, the telephone, you get light bulbs, which changes how we deal with the day, you get elevators, and the rise of the modern city. And even if you think about what we're doing today, there was sort of a joke about Bobby needing to upgrade his bandwidth when he ran into some issues earlier. But think about the magic of what we're doing now. That I'm talking here, and this is getting beamed all over the world, sound and video, and it comes out that my voice gets replicated in some way and comes out of a simple speaker. And the speaker is probably the simplest element of the system. And there's probably 3 people on this call out of the 920 odd people who could actually tell you how the thing works. That we've come so comfortable with this technology and just assume it was there. And the younger generation assumes it's always there or always has been there. But if I think about my grandfather, actually his parents or my grandmother's parents, their life around 1870, and this is a house in 1880, it's a real house. You can see the kids standing behind the door. It looks a little bit like a diorama. But their life was not that much different from life a few hundred years beforehand. It was generally not a long life. You had large families. You made your own clothes. There was no ordering in, no indoor plumbing. no hot water. And this whole idea of vacation that we just talked about on the prior session, that's a modern invention. In fact, retirement is a modern invention. You worked until you died or until you were disabled if your neighbors could take care of you. And this idea of an idyllic childhood that we think about and getting rid of child labor, which they sort of talked about in the earlier session with Denise, that's also, frankly, a modern invention. It was normal for kids to work during all this time. So fast forward 100 years from then into 1970 and think about the magic of the household, and let's get beyond the colors of the 1970 household. Frankly, I have a feeling that in a few years, these colors will all be back and we'll think it's fantastic. But everything that you did this morning, you got on, you got up, you may turn off a light, turn off an alarm clock, all modern. If you used a bathroom, the toilet and the sink are modern inventions and probably one of the most important public health inventions of all time. And then the modern kitchen with refrigeration, a stove, a coffee maker. For all of humanity, 200,000 years of modern humanity, 50,000 years since we left Africa, you're talking, a half of 1% of our existence on the planet. None of this existed. It's all been a moment in time, and we're adopting technology faster and faster. And this chart looks at a bunch of different technologies and how fast they're adopted by households. And the steeper the curve, the faster that the technology is adopted. And you can see from 1860 to 2000, this is 2019, that technology gets adopted faster and faster. And you can see almost little subroutines running in this and how it affects our day-to-day life. And we've talked a little bit about retailing, and retailing in terms of technology and being hit by technology and being hit by technology during COVID is probably the poster child for change. So roll it back to 1860. If you went shopping, you'd go to a dry goods store. There'd be a proprietor there, and it would be he would get your stuff, put it in the bag for you. He would look at you, figure out how much you could pay, and then that would be the price. And then around 1900, you get the rise of department stores, you get fixed pricing, you get broad selection. And the innovation then was fixed pricing, which is not such an innovation today. But back then, and for all of humanity before then, it was. 1916, shortly after, you get this first self-service grocery store with Piggly Wiggly, and then on to the large department stores and grocery stores. And the A&P got so big, Atlantic and Pacific Tea Company, the government actually wanted to break it up. And probably most people on this hop-in session haven't even heard of the Atlantic and Pacific Tea Company. You then get shopping malls, first outdoor, then indoor, then big box stores, then Costco, and then you get Amazon. And by the time you get to Amazon, you have an ecosystem that is completely different, that can support something that's completely different, that allows for bigger reach and bigger growth. And you get this stupendous, amazing growth. And just the increment from 2018 to 2019, that 50 billion, is bigger than the revenues of the American Express company. Now, one other note, because there was a fair amount of time that we spent today talking about ethical companies, and we think about Amazon and this growth, and raise your hand if you think Amazon is the most ethical company. Bezos' income, actually not his income, his net worth went up by $90 billion. And we haven't exactly heard a lot about his give back. We've heard a lot from his wife, ex-wife, and her give back, but not a lot from Jeff himself. And so fast forward, and what you see here, Amazon is now exploding. They, in the third quarter, in fourth quarter, I couldn't find, their sales growth is up 37%, which tops, what everybody expected. If you annualize that, it'd be $100 billion of growth, that 37%. It's not going to be annualized, I don't think. but there's only 32 companies in the Fortune 500, the US Fortune 500, with sales of more than $100 billion. And it's interesting as you think about this, and we talked earlier with a woman from Fast Company about immersive experiences and whether people are going to want an immersive experience when they go shopping. And I'll get into this later on, but it's very dangerous to make broad strokes about anything, about what is going to be. Nobody really knows what is going to be. We can look back and see what was, and we can take a guess on what may be. But nobody really knows. I'm not sure that, for me, I don't really care about an immersive experience. I don't like shopping. I'd rather get in and out. So my immersive experience may be online. But what is happening right now, if you look at Amazon and why they're doing so well during COVID, is obvious. People don't want to go into stores. So you get the digital revolution plus COVID. And what do you get? You get the digital revolution on steroids. And the environment is now changed. And what has changed is adoption. It's not the fundamental underlying technology, although that is changing. Witness Hop-In, which we're on right now. You've got online shopping and delivery for food, pharmaceuticals, apparel, alcohol. And in Massachusetts, and I did not look this up because I really don't care, and it's actually true, they were talking about home delivery of marijuana, okay? Which is very important to have apparently during a pandemic. You have remote everything. Conferences clearly here. You have remote working, which we were talking about, remote learning, which most people frankly don't like. And I actually did my first telehealth appointment. And as soon as they were about to tell me what was wrong, the line cut out, just like in a movie. And then you get unbelievable automation. And people think about automation as automation of factories, but there's a lot of automation out there, including finance. Venmo, credit cards. How many of you have gone to an ATM? How many of you are handling cash? How many of you, if you don't like shaking hands, do you like exchanging cash with people? And what happens to cash over a period of time is a really interesting question. The other thing that's going to happen is the technology that was so wonderful, like a landline, that was such an innovation at the turn of the century to connect everybody to everything, starts to dissipate. And so things will start to change. And technologies that were wow before don't always stay so wow over time. And there is something else happening behind everything that we really need to, I think about and consider. Think about your phone and the digital exhaust. Think about all the credit cards that you're whipping out for everything, and Alexa, Google Assistant, and Siri. Think about the connected car that is out there. And cars are going to become increasingly more connected, and they're going to become increasingly more autonomous. And think about omnipresent cameras, and think about facial recognition. And you probably figured out where I'm going with this, which is privacy is going to be a huge issue as we move forward with technological adoption, especially as we think about what's coming next around machine learning and AI. And that is going to be huge. And it is much closer than people realize. You can use AI for a lot of things. It almost seems like magic, but for a young generation of engineers, they understand the algorithms and they can deploy it and deploy it quickly. And it is being deployed, and people know a lot about you, know a lot about all of us. Simultaneously, and importantly for the industry, we are going to have some geopolitical issues in the upcoming year, unrelated to technology, but it was so important that I had to at least throw one slide in here talking about what's going on in China. So in the US, we have clarity that we're going to have a peaceful transition from, as usual, from one president to the next. And China and the geopolitics of China will remain out there, as will the tensions. And there's lots of places where the geopolitics are going to be an issue. China is big and China is special. And I don't know if how many of you have heard of Thucydides, who talked about the wars between Athens and Sparta and the fact that Sparta was concerned about the rise of Athens. And when you get a rising power, you inevitably have conflict. It's called the Thucydides trap. But this is going to be an issue for us in this industry and for the country and the world, because we can't easily disengage from the Chinese supply chain for reasons I just don't have time really to get into at this point in time. So as we look forward, sort of from a high end, from a 50,000 foot lens, there are going to be a lot of changes in the markets around us. And it's hard to know exactly what those changes are, except to say that some of the subtext that we have talked about in this conference today are going to continue. So things like sustainability and social impact, I think, are going to be a subtext for the industry. And we're going to see where that goes from here, but it will become increasingly important, and it will become differently important to different customers. So understanding our different customers is going to be critically important. But we are going to have, like every industry, an accelerated industry change. There'll be a change promotional landscape. The products, the markets, catalogs. We talked about IKEA earlier today, getting rid of their catalog. I will be very curious to see if anybody sends out a full line catalog this year. And I agree with the people who said, boy, it's really time to be done with those. Trade shows and events and what those turn into. Well, we've got Tim and Paul after this to talk about that. What happens to a sales call over time? Are they the same? Question mark. And I can tell you that there will be supplier consolidation just because of the cost of doing business and managing all this stuff. And that China will become increasingly complicated. The reality is there's always been change. No business model survives over time because the world changes and technology changes. This is really not new to have these kind of systemic changes. But you have to think about how you can manage change through customer value. And we talked about in the beginning, you had the Permian extinction, and then you had the asteroid that hit the Earth. And the people who could change were the ones who, or the people, there weren't people, the creatures that were able to survive were the ones who could adapt to the environment. Adapting to the current business environment means thinking about customer value. Understanding, and it's different for everybody, how the world has changed relative to the customers and how we help the customers to navigate this new world. Our products and services have critical value. I heard somebody talk about, cheap t-shirts, or, everybody has a t-shirt, which is a wealthy person's view of the world, frankly. As somebody, she's talked about cheap tote bags, actually, not t-shirts. Somebody who makes tote bags and soap. There are customers for whom tote bags and soap differently are very valuable. And we have to think about the role of our products and services now and making that value clear and understanding why your customers select you. And it can't just be creativity. And it has to be something that you can articulate in a very clear way. So from here, we really have to understand the old world is gone and nobody really knows the future. So it's about being ready to pivot and helping your customers to find the new opportunities, because they're going to need our help now. And in any change, there is opportunity, and there's opportunity if we're able to sell the value of what we do. So I want to thank the folks who ended up inviting me to this, Mark and Bobby and Catherine. And I will turn the comm back over to you. Right on time, I will say.
Just as I would have expected, Jonathan. Thank you so much, as always, inspiring, and you always give us lots to think about. So we really appreciate you being here with us today.
Thank you.